morning, everyone. I'm Teresa Cutlip with the Purchasing Division. Welcome to today's session, Doing Business with West Virginia, presented by Mark Cotton, Technical Services Unit Manager, and Crystal Husted, Senior Buyer in the Purchasing Division. This training is scheduled to last until 11:30. We'll answer your questions throughout the presentation as best as we can, so you can put those in your chat window and we'll get to them as we can. And now we'll get started with Mark.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to join us here for the information that we're going to share with you about the state's public procurement process. Hopefully, we are able to communicate a lot of good knowledge to you all, whether you are a vendor who is new to doing business with the state of West Virginia, or maybe you've bid once upon a time or a regular bidder on solicitation opportunities. Hopefully there's something for everyone. As Teresa said, my name is Mark Cotton, and several of the programs that I'm responsible for here at the Purchasing Division are the state's vendor registration program and the state's small women and minority-owned business certification program. Through the years of administering those programs for the state, we've put together a lot of the information that we know is most valuable to vendors who are receiving contracts or competing for contracts with state agencies. So hopefully the experience that we've put into this is beneficial to you all. So we're going to talk about a number of things this morning before I turn it over to Senior Buyer Crystal Husted. I'm going to cover why does the state of West Virginia, with all its resources, need to buy from the private sector in the first place? And there's vast amounts of things that we buy from the private sector every year. And my goal is to communicate some of the primary strategies that your business might fit your business when it comes to being part of the private sector spend that the state needs every year. We're also going to talk about and spend the most time on the very important question of what does the state need? In my view, you don't know where to start if you don't know what we need. So we're going to talk about a lot of strategies and resources for you to know what all the agencies in the 55 counties are trying to buy. And because there's so much information out there on what the state needs, we're going to cover different ways to learn about those opportunities, both when you have the opportunity to search yourself and also through automated ways that where the state may be able to find you for a particular commodity or service that you could provide to us. We know that you're not in business to learn state government, and you're not in business to search our bulletins all day long. You've got a business to run and other things. So we try to make it as easy as possible for you to connect you with the information you need on what we're trying to buy so that you can make the decision on whether or not you're going to compete or make an offer for that particular item. And then one thing I want to underscore, there's no registration, there's no fees required for you to bid on solicitation opportunities that the agencies have out there. But I will cover briefly, since it's under our umbrella, what you would need to do if you become a successful recipient of a contract in order to receive that contract. And that involves registering with the Purchasing Division. But that's a little bit down the road, but I will share a little bit of information about that, as well as opportunities if you become a small women and minority-owned business. And Crystal Husted, once I bore you to death with all that this morning, is going to go into detail about different types of contracts the state awards, and from your perspective, most importantly, how you would bid on each type of contract differently. And there's also a little bit of information she's going to share about conflict resolution between the state and the vendor and what rights you have and that sort of thing. So getting started this morning, why does the state of West Virginia, with tens of thousands of employees, need to procure goods and services from the private sector. Well, in a lot of cases, we are not able to manufacture certain things for ourselves, or if we did, it would not be cost effective for us to do so. So when we do have to go to the private sector for commodities and services, one of the things that we do is harness our bulk buying power for the most commonly procured goods, or for other items, we will competitively bid a particular good or service that we need in order to get the lowest price possible. So in those cases, whether it's a bulk item that we're buying for all agencies in all counties, like paper or furniture or computers or fuel or automobiles, or whether it's we need a roof repair on a particular building, or something that's out, for lack of a better word, I'll call a one-time purchase. We're going to competitively bid that, but publicly advertise that first. Now, there's also a need, and we hope it doesn't happen, when life or property is at stake, that when an agency will find themselves in an emergency situation, and they will bypass the competitive bid process and go directly to a vendor they know who can complete the work, whether it's a flood cleanup, roof repair, security repair, things like that. And in those cases, it will help you to introduce yourself to the relevant agencies that might call on you in an emergency situation. And that's one of the strategies that we'll talk about later in my presentation. But when agencies know you're out there, they may contact you either in an emergency situation or in a small dollar amount. So my goal is to not overwhelm you with government bureaucracy or complicated procedures, but there is one spend threshold that I want you to be aware of, and that is the $50,000 threshold. Now, when you are beginning your journey of competing for state contracts, it doesn't necessarily matter right away whether or not an agency is putting it out for bid or whether my office is putting it out for bid, the Central Purchasing Division. But in some cases, a state agency, for anything that's expected to cost under $50,000, can bid out and award a contract under their own authority without going through our office. If something is expected to exceed $50,000, then the Central Purchasing Division will be putting that contract out for bid on their behalf. Ultimately, the most important thing for you to remember, whether it's over or under, is that if you are bidding for an agency delegated contract, your bid response would need to be delivered to the agency. And if it's over 50,000, your bid would need to be delivered to the purchasing division here at Building 15 on the Capitol Complex. Now, in some cases, you may be responding electronically, so you wouldn't have to worry about the logistics of where your bid needs to go in those cases. But the spend threshold gives you a little bit of a different procedure when you're responding. Now, already you might be thinking, that most transactions that your business would have with the state of West Virginia might always be under 50,000 or over 50,000. And either way, it doesn't matter. You can make just as much money doing multiple under $50,000 contracts as you can doing a single contract over 50,000. It just depends on, what your average transactions are. Now, if you think you might be operating primarily in the under $50,000 world, you can market yourself directly to the state agencies that would be most relevant for whatever it is you're in business to do. And we have a list of the state purchasing contacts at all the agencies on our website at that link that you see in the left column. Now, I mentioned the emergency situations earlier. That is an example of, you want agencies to know who you are if they are reaching out to you for a solicitation under $50,000 or if they have an emergency situation. And we'll go into more detail about the under $50,000 threshold because, from looking at the list of registrants today in the webinar, I know that we have some large businesses, but we also have a lot of small businesses. So I want to make sure that I address everybody's needs. And as we talked this morning, you're welcome to type questions to our moderator, Teresa, and we'll make sure that we stop at relevant points in the presentation and address something that you may want more information on or that I don't make clear. So the two worlds, over 50,000 and under 50,000. Let's talk more about the agency delegated area under $50,000. To make it easier for you, the vendor, in this under $50,000 world, there are thresholds where you may not have to submit a bid in writing, or you may not have to submit a bid at all if it's a very small dollar purchase. For that range, which we consider $5,000 and below, an agency does not have to competitively bid something that's going to be $5,000 or less. If they have the item they need, if there's an item they need, they can go directly to a vendor they know and make that purchase. And of course, in that case, they would need to know who you are and that you can supply that under $5,000 item. So I bring that up because it's one of the many areas where it's important for you to introduce yourself to the agencies that might need your stuff. Now, if it's over $5,000 and a penny and up to $20,000, then an agency just needs to get 3 verbal bids from vendors in order to move forward with their purchase. Because again, in this lower dollar world, we are not throwing rules at agencies that are going to make it difficult to buy something that is in these lower price range relative to what the state of West Virginia spends. Now, if the expected cost of a particular transaction is expected to be over 20,000, but under 50,000 or up to 50,000, I should say, then the agency would need to get 3 written bids from you for that particular commodity or service. But, ultimately, these are very flexible procedures for both you and the agency when these lower dollar amounts are being spent. So I emphasize this to you because, to a small business, this may be where most, if not all, of your potential transactions with the state of West Virginia might be. So I want to take down any walls of intimidation that might exist so you can see a path forward to yourself as the successful vendor for a contract or an order from a state agency. Now, if something is expected to be over 50,000, then we're going to be, we meaning the purchasing division, is going to be administering that contract for the state agency. So I'm going to take you through 3 strategies for you to potentially receive a state order or a state contract. And these 3 strategies are by no means not the only ways that you might be the successful vendor for a state contract with an agency. But from the experience that I have with the vendor community and as a purchasing division employee, these are the 3 primary things that I want the vendor community to know in regard to, or when you ask yourself the question, how do I receive a contract from the state of West Virginia? Whether you have 5 employees or 500. And as I alluded to in the objectives, the first strategy revolves around knowing what the state of West Virginia's agencies need. And in most cases, bidding opportunities, which we call solicitations, are publicly advertised in the vendor self-service portal in a section called the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. The vendor self-service portal is an interface or a dashboard, you might say, that you can log into or access at wvoasis.gov. And when you look at the vendor self-service portal, you'll see a button called View Published Solicitations. And you can look at the list of published solicitations without a login, without a password. It's not behind a firewall. It's just there. And you'll see this bulletin of opportunities for your business with all agencies in the 55 counties. And these are live job opportunities. They're out for bid right now. And you'll even see a countdown timer for how many days or hours are left for you to respond with your offer of a price for any of those particular jobs. Now, in the vendor self-service portal, you can create an account for your company, and that's free to do so. And I still want to emphasize at this point, you don't have to register with purchasing or any other state agency to read these solicitations or to bid on these solicitations.
Okay, I've got candy. That's fine.
We require you to do that because at this stage of the purchasing process, we want there to be as much competition and participation from the vendor community as possible. So it wouldn't be in our best interest if we made you jump through a bunch of bureaucratic loopholes or pay any kind of fees just for you to submit a price to us for the particular good or service that you can provide. Now, if you did make one of those free logins on behalf of your company, you would be assigned a WV Oasis vendor number. And that would be a way that the state would identify you, throughout the procurement process. But the purchasing bulletin in the vendor self-service portal is the most important thing I can tell you about learning what the state of West Virginia needs. And the bulletin should include any solicitation from a state agency in the 55 counties expected to exceed $20,000. But you may see solicitations advertised in the bulletin under $20,000, especially if that particular state agency is trying to procure something that's a little bit unusual, or if they just want to harness the exposure of the vendor self-service portals bulletin, to get a little bit of competition for the thing that they need. Now, when you go to the WV Oasis website, go into the vendor self-service portal and click View Published Solicitations, this is what the list of project opportunities look like. You've got, listed row by row. You can see a brief description of the thing that the state agency needs. You see who is in charge of this particular solicitation, the agency they're with, and how much time is left for you to respond. So, there is more information available than this just one or two lines of description, fortunately. If you clicked on the project number, which is located in the third column there, you'll be taken to a screen that I'll show you that goes into very detailed description about the particular widget or particular service that the agency needs. But at this stage, when you're just trying to get an idea of what the state of West Virginia is trying to buy from the private sector, this project listing is potential gold for you if you are trying to see if there's something that you can provide to the state of West Virginia. A few things that I'll point out while I'm on this screenshot. For those solicitations where if you want to respond to one of these solicitations, there's a blue button at the far right that says respond, and that would give you the opportunity to respond online to this particular advertisement. Now, you'll see one of those respond buttons is grayed out, which means you're not able to respond online to that one, but it would be something that we would want the vendor community to respond to on paper. Now, for those solicitation opportunities where you do have the option to respond online, that doesn't mean you have to respond online. Most state agencies will also take a vendor response by paper, And the purchasing division has always accepted a response from the vendor community on paper. So the online response from the purchasing division standpoint, it's not required that you respond online. And a lot of vendors aren't comfortable, or they don't have high-speed internet, or they run into other, bumps with the online portal, and that's okay. From the purchasing division's perspective, we're not going to cause that to eliminate your seat at the table if you want to give us a price for that particular item. If you are your ability, a vendor's ability to navigate the vendor self-service portal is not something we're going to grade you on for whatever it is, whatever you're in business to do that you might be able to provide to the state. And then, as I said, most state agencies will also accept a paper response. Now, the last thing I'll point out on this screen is in regard to that $50,000 threshold, where I mentioned over $50,000 is being administered by the purchasing division, and under $50,000 is being bid out and awarded by the agency's authority. At this stage, you can see at a glance whether a particular solicitation is being administered by purchasing or the state agency. In that project number, in the third column, there's a contract prefix that either starts with an A or a C. And if it begins with an A, that means it's being administered by the agency in the under $50,000 world. If it starts with a C, that means it is being administered by the purchasing division on behalf of the agency. The C stands for central purchasing. Now, at this stage, you're just trying to learn, is there anything that I can provide to the state? But as you go forward, that's an early way to see if you would need to send your bid to the agency or to central purchasing. You can also search the bulletin by keyword. If you don't want to read through row after row of everything that all the state agencies are trying to buy today, you can search with a brief description of whatever it is you're in business to do. And I want to let you know about the search box. It is not as instinctive as what we're used to with Google, for example. And I recommend you keep your searches as simple as possible, because the more words you add, if any of them do not match the description that is written by the purchasing official for the advertisement in the bulletin, then that's going to eliminate the match that you may want to see. So in the examples that I show, I keep the search descriptions short, like phone system and building maintenance. That's going to be the best way for you to make sure you don't eliminate a match that you want from your search. And in the cases of these search terms, I have made the point on this slide to say that you will want to put wildcards between all the words you use, because if you put in the word phone system, and let's say, for example, the actual solicitation description says phone and fax system, then you're going to eliminate that match that you may want to see. So if you put that wild card in between all the words, which in this case is an asterisk on your keyboard, then searching phone system will still come up for you if it's written phone and fax system, or phone and VoIP system, or whatever. This just reduces your chances of missing something that you may want to see and read more about, whether you can provide it. Now, when it comes to reading the bulletin in the vendor self-service portal, you can do that without a login, but there are genuine advantages if you set up a user ID and password for the vendor self-service portal on behalf of your company. That is what's going to enable you to respond to a solicitation online, because obviously we need to know who you are if you are submitting a response to something through your computer. One thing I want to mention that if you do set up that user ID and password for the vendor self-service portal, it does not take you through the registration process for any state agency. So if you become the successful vendor and need to register with the Secretary of State, the purchasing division, the finance division, et cetera, you'll have to do that with those individual agencies. When you create that user ID in VSS, it's misleading because you'll get an email that says, congratulations, you're now registered with the state of West Virginia. But that only means that you have created that login ID for the VSS portal. Your information is not trickling to all the state agencies yet to be eligible to receive contracts. So that's just a warning I want to give you because it's a point of confusion. But when you set up the account in vendor self-service, you can save all your company's information. You can save commodity codes in your vendor record, which I'll go into detail about here in a moment. And it gives you the quick ability to respond online later to a solicitation when you find one out for bid that is relevant to your products and services. Now, you can register online with the purchasing division if you choose to do so at this stage. We'll need a certain amount of information about your company. And if you want to be fully registered with purchasing, there is a $125 fee, but you don't have to pay that until you are the successful recipient of an order or a contract exceeding $5,000 with a state agency. And just for your information, if you want to register to receive payments for the things you sell, you will need to send a signed W-9 to one of our sister agencies, the finance division, and you can do that by emailing your W-9 to vendoradmin@wv.gov. But again, those registrations, you don't have to do that at the first stage. You do not have to make those, you do not have to complete those registrations just to bid on something that you find in the vendor self-service portal's bulletin. Now, if and when you set up that user ID in vendor self-service, this is an example of the dashboard that you see. On the left screenshot, you see that your information is saved about your company and is ready to go whenever you start either responding online or receiving contracts from a state agency. And then the right screenshot shows you all the different things that you have the ability to update. You can create multiple user IDs for different people at your company, which I recommend you do in case somebody is out on vacation or if somebody leaves your company. You've got that continuity of having several users that have the ability to search and respond and update your record with the state. You can also add commodity codes to your vendor record, which I am going to go into some more detail about here in just a moment. Now, before I'll tell you what a commodity code is, but briefly, it's a way to describe any product or service on earth that can be manufactured and sold. And this is the state of West Virginia's way of knowing what it is you're in business to provide. If we can't find you for a particular need if we do not have that commodity code listed, because we don't know what it is you're in business to do, or we don't know what you have the ability to sell to the state. So building your commodity code profile in the vendor self-service portal is going to be tremendously valuable when it comes to connecting what you do with the agency that needs it. And once you have your commodity codes, which I'll show you how to grab, on this screen on the right, in the VSS portal under the commodities tab, there's that blue button on the right that says add commodity /service. And you would just take your commodity codes one by one and save them in your profile. And that's going to give you a robust description for the state of what it is you can sell to us. And I encourage you to put as many commodity codes as are appropriate in your vendor record. Now, when it comes to knowing more about the particular advertisement that you're looking at in the bulletin, As I mentioned, you have more than just the 1 or 2 line description that's on that main screen. When you click on the blue link, that's the project number in the list of published solicitations, you're taken to a longer description of the project, and you're taken to a list of attachments that are going to further describe either the job or the widget and all the applicable terms and conditions that would be involved for the successful vendor. There's also going to be instructions to bidders in the attachments section, and absolutely anything that you would need to know to craft your response, whether it's just price related or whether there's more information you need to know in order to give the best response to the state. All of the attachments that you see in this particular advertisement, you'll want to download and review prior to responding. So you make sure that you meet all the requirements and that you send all the information back to the state agency for whatever it is you think you can provide. And this is an example of just more information about any kind of advertisements that are in the bulletin section of the vendor self-service portal. So let's talk about commodity codes for those of you that may not be familiar. There may be an expiration date on how long I can use this metaphor, but commodity codes are like the Dewey Decimal System that was in our school libraries, describing all the different types of genres of books that we had at our disposal. The commodity code library that the state of West Virginia uses comes from the United Nations, and it's called the United Nations Standard Products and Services Code. And you can look up what UNSPSC commodity codes are applicable to your business on the website that I've listed here, unspsc.org. It's on your slide there at the bottom in bold. And that's what the UNSPSC website looks like. And you can type in keywords on the UN website like steel, welding, roof repair, consulting, marketing, just literally anything on earth that can be made. You will be astounded if you really do a deep dive into the commodity code library, how many hundreds of thousands of commodity codes are out there describing what it is that you are potentially in business to do. And again, I encourage you to choose as many commodity codes as is relevant to your business, so you've got the best chance of being found by a state agency procurement officer that is putting something out for bid or searching for a potential vendor that can provide the thing that they need. Because remember, a lot of our state agencies are buying things that are very obscure and are very hard to find. So if you're that business that can provide it, we want to make sure we're able to find you with this commodity by matching commodity code, by matching to your commodity code either in a manual search or by electronic email alerts that the system sends out sometimes.
Mark, we do have a question. Excuse me. We have someone saying they are a nonprofit that consults government. Is this a process for them? Is this?
Okay, in regard to the question from a nonprofit that consults government, is this whole process relevant to you? And I would say, yes, it absolutely is. Your nonprofit status is primarily in regard to your taxation to the state and federal government. The state of West Virginia contracts with a lot of nonprofits, and in our eyes, there's really no difference between a nonprofit and a corporation. That really comes down to your 1099 classification with the federal government, which is not something that we are looking at the stage, at the public procurement process stage. So we wouldn't look at you as a nonprofit. We would look at you as a consultant for whatever area of expertise that you specialize in. So just your nonprofit status, in my mind, I'm going to put that aside. That really doesn't have a bearing on your eligibility. That's just related to your taxation, and you're a consultant for whatever areas that are relevant to your the subject matter, and the state employs a lot of consultants for a variety of things. So yes, this process is still very relative to you, and everything I've covered so far would apply to you as a nonprofit the same way it would apply to a corporation. So far there would be no distinction right now in regard to that 1099 status that you just happen to have.
And one more. Is this the process to search West Virginia agencies who need automotive repair work for fleet vehicles?
That's a very good question. In regard to automotive services for fleet vehicles, that particular service could be bid and advertised in a couple of different ways. An individual agency may have an agency master agreement that they advertise in the vendor self-service portal, but there may also be a larger maintenance contract advertised and awarded by the fleet division for all state vehicles. That's something that would be advantageous to you to either contact the purchasing division buyer for the fleet division and ask them about opportunities for statewide vehicle maintenance. And it would also be advantageous to you to search the purchasing bulletin in the VSS portal for either current maintenance opportunities or past maintenance opportunities to see how frequently that may have gone out to bid in the past. There's also cases in which I know of, just from the years I've been in government, if a state vehicle breaks down in proximity to let's say outside of the city, there may be a situation where the state needs to contract with a garage that just happens to be able to go get that vehicle and repair it to get it back on the road to go back to Charleston or wherever that vehicle is based. So there's a variety of opportunities there, both through large fleet division contracts or small agency related contracts. And I would certainly encourage you to contact myself at the end of this webinar, and I will put you in touch with the purchasing division buyer for the fleet agency, and other things for your specific area of service that you would want to become familiar with if you're willing to do a little bit of homework on that. That'll hurry now.
Well, we do have someone asking if any of this information is it provided in a bid? Let's see. I found it in a bid for a contract with the state.
Okay, I'm going to answer your question as I think I understand it. If I do not understand it, please rephrase it and I'll make sure I get you the right answer. And I also invite Crystal Husted to weigh in on this if she wants. But when you are looking at a particular advertisement in the purchasing bulletin, in the VSS portal, anything that is relevant to you, the bidder, is going to be mentioned. And in fact, I'll go back to my slide about it. Anything that you would need to know about this item or service that we need is going to be covered within these attachments that are with the project advertisement, whether it's a parts number list or whether it's an architect has designed a building that a vendor needs to now go and build. It's all going to be here. Some of these attachments could be hundreds of pages. And I don't say that to intimidate you, but I do say that to underscore that the state is very specific in the pages of this advertisement's attachments. There should not be any question about exactly what we need. If it's a truck of a certain tonnage or pulling power, the horsepower and the tonnage, the weight and everything like that is going to be described for you to respond with the appropriate truck that you might be able to provide. And Crystal, is there anything that you'd like to elaborate on as far as that question goes?
Yeah, any solicitation that's going to be advertised specific specifically speaking about the purchasing division, which would be in the vendor self-service. You would see the CRFQ or any solicitation that begins with a C. We're going to attach all of the terms and conditions that's going to be relevant to the solicitation. We're also going to attach the specifications. So any pricing pages, that's all going to be attached in the vendor self-service portal.
And if we didn't answer the question in the way, if we didn't understand your question correctly, please retype and we'll make sure we address it. If you were asking about something else, we want to make sure you leave here with the information you need. And, the opportunity we have for the back and forth in this webinar, we want to make sure you get, the information that's relevant to you. We can't talk to each and every one of you about your particular business. We can do that on email later. But during this presentation, we want to make sure we, communicate everything that's on our slides and get these questions answered correctly.
Okay, do you want me to hold on for a couple of these? You want to move on forward a little bit? We do have a lot of information to cover.
Okay.
If we happen to miss your question, I am taking note of who is asking, and we'll have all this on record, and we will follow up with you if we do not answer your question during this webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll roll forward a little bit because I may be answering some of these questions later in my slides. And also, I don't want to take up all of Crystal Husted's time. I'll keep moving forward, and then before I turn it over to Crystal Husted, I'll get to any remaining questions that we have. So we've talked about the information that you can access in the project advertisements in the bulletin. We talked about what a commodity code is and where you would go to add commodity codes to your vendor record with the state, which is right here under Edit My Account, Commodities tab, and that blue button to add the codes that you find for your business on this United Nations website, unspsc.org. So that's the first and longest strategy that I'm going to go into this morning, though I do think it is the most important because you can't get started if you don't know what the state's trying to buy. And whether or not you make the decision to compete for a certain project, if you don't know it's out there, then you do not have the freedom to make that decision. Am I going to put the time into researching this? So that's strategy 1 of 3. Now, strategy 2 of 3, which again, I promise is much shorter, revolves around marketing yourself to state agency personnel. And I mentioned this term earlier. A procurement officer is the state employee at a specific agency that is responsible for all the purchasing that goes on at that agency. And whether they like it or not, we list all of the state agency procurement officers on the purchasing division website with their contact information. So let's think back to that under $50,000 threshold that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Especially if you think what you're in business to do, each transaction is going to average under 50,000. These are the people that you would want to contact directly and market yourself to for the commodity or service that you can provide, because these are the people that are going to bid out a solicitation under $50,000. And again, think back to that slide that broke down the thresholds within the under $50,000 range. The procurement officers, if they're buying if the transaction is $3,000, $4,000, they don't even have to go out to bid because we don't see that as an efficient way to do business. So, but the state agency procurement officer can't call you for a $4,000 item if they don't know you can provide it. So what I recommend to vendors is to make a 1-page introduction about who you are, where you are, and what you can provide, and pick 5 or 6 agencies from the list, the state agency procurement officer listing that's in our vendor resource center, and start with those 5 or 6 agencies that might need your stuff and let them know that you're out there and that next time they have a need, under $50,000 to let you know. And again, and we hope this doesn't happen, but those emergency situations, if you are in business for cleanup, for plumbing, emergency electrical repair, things like that, any agencies with a physical plant are going to be, that's going to be state personnel that you want to know that you are out there and that you're able to respond to emergency situations as well. That listing of procurement officers includes over 100 agencies. So there's a lot of potential agency delegated business for you there. Now, if you really want to get into some homework about what agencies have bought in the past, we have that information on our website. So what relevancy might there be to what the state has bought in the past? Because right now we're talking about what the state's going to buy in the future, right? There may be some advantage to you, and a lot of vendors do this. They will look up an old solicitation for their particular commodity and see what the specifications were the last time the state bought it. Then they'll also look at who responded, so they get an idea of how much competition there was for it and who specifically the competitors were. And then they will also want to see who the ultimate successful vendor was. All those three pieces, what the state has bought is going to be in the purchasing bulletin and the vendor self-service portal. Who responded, that's going to be posted for central purchasing solicitations on our website. And you can see chronologically any bid that the purchasing division has opened in the last several years is listed on that particular day on our website under bids received. And that's not behind a firewall. There's not a password. Anybody on earth with an internet connection, if they want to, can go to the purchasing division site after the bid opening and see what bids were opened at the purchasing division and read through what the vendors provided. And then we have a notice of award report that shows who the ultimate successful vendor was. So if you really wanted to look at every time the state has put out for bid roof repair or computers or fuel or marketing services, you can look at this trilogy of information on our website in our transparency section, and you can do a deep dive into that if you want. If you want to familiarize yourself with how the state has bought your commodity in the past, there may not be something out for bid now, but you can do a little bit of research and prepare yourself for how it might go as far as the advertisement the next time we have a need for your item. And that's strategy 2. So I promised you it would be much shorter. The third strategy, which again, these are not the only ways in which you might win a state contract, but these are very common methods that I want you to be aware of. The third strategy revolves around opportunities for statewide contracts. And statewide contracts are a longer term pursuit for a vendor, but they're potentially a very high yield pursuit if you are a successful statewide contract vendor. I mentioned at the very beginning that for the most commonly purchased commodities of all the agencies in all of the 55 counties, the purchasing division will harness that bulk buying power and put these most commonly procured commodities out for bid together. And I'm talking about things like paper, office supplies, automobiles, fuel, computers, furniture, etc. The things that practically every state agency in the 55 counties are going to need, we're going to bid that out as one giant contract and award, in most cases, to a single vendor. Now, these statewide contracts are bid out every year at most. So if you can provide fuel at the cheapest price right now to the entire state of West Virginia, we can't put you on that contract tomorrow. You're going to have to wait to the next time we bid out fuel, because right now we've made a promise to a successful fuel vendor that they are the exclusive provider of that commodity to all the agencies. And in exchange for that promise, that vendor has given us their rock bottom price on fuel. But on our website for statewides, which you can look at, you can see all the most commonly procured commodities that we have out there right now. Last time I counted, there were about 70 statewide contracts, most of them awarded to a single awardee. So it's a longer term pursuit to do your homework and wait until one of these statewide contracts comes out for bid. But it's a potentially very high yield contract for you if you become the exclusive provider to all 55 counties for this particular commodity. But I encourage you to go to our statewide contract page and see what kind of things that we create a statewide contract for. Of the 70 or so commodities that we have listed here, there's the potential that you can provide one, or that you may want to get into the business of providing one. And again, that's on our website, and here's the link to that specific page where they're all advertised. And you not only see this list of what the commodities are, but you can also look on the contract itself and see the catalogs for each of these and the part numbers and things like that. So there's a lot of information out there about these statewides. And as I said in this slide, you can go back and look at what the advertisement looked like when it was out for bid, who responded, so you can see how much competition there was and who bid on it. And then you can see who the ultimate successful vendor was. So, the statewide contracts, it's a longer term pursuit. There's some strategy meetings involved, but it is a very lucrative contract for the 70 some vendors, or 70 or more vendors that, have a statewide contract with the state for the 55 counties. Now, since it is one of my programs, I would feel like I shorted you if I did not talked about what made you eligible to receive a state contract, which again, you don't have to do this just to bid, but if you want to go ahead and get registered to be eligible to receive a contract, or if you are the apparent successful vendor for a contract, then you would need to register with our Office at Purchasing Division, and by providing some information about your company and paying a $125 annual fee for the time in which you would be getting these orders from state agencies. Again, you don't have to do this just to bid, but this is something that you would need to do prior to contract award. Since these contracts are funded by taxpayer money, we need to know things about your business so we know where the money is going. The legal name of your business, your physical address and phone number, current active federal tax ID. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about when it comes to, what we need to have on file before this contract can be issued. Now, the vendor registration office at the purchasing division doesn't just register businesses to receive contracts from the state, but we can also provide information to you about certain solicitation opportunities. We can give you a little bit of information about other agencies' requirements with their registration programs. Like, for example, I mentioned that to register with the finance division, you have to send them a W-9. So things like that, we are available to have a one-on-one conversation with your business. And again, I consider the information that we've put together in this vendor webinar one of the services that the vendor registration office provides here at the purchasing division. If you're close to Charleston, you're welcome to make an appointment with us and sit down and talk to us about what you do. And we can talk to you about different places within state government to look for opportunities. So, and then we also have a lot of written information. If you have not had enough of content from me, there is more that we can provide. So we're happy to be of service to you. We're not just about, registering you and making you eligible to receive contracts. Now, the other program that I administer that I'll briefly mention, because there is a very lucrative opportunity for you if you receive this certification, It was 12 years ago that the West Virginia legislature tasked the purchasing division with certifying businesses that fell into the categories of small, women, or minority-owned businesses. And for vendors that apply for SWAM certification status with the purchasing division, you have this designation for a period of 2 years if you meet the qualifications in the application process. And even if you never bid on something with the state of West Virginia, which we hope you do, but let's say you're not interested in doing that right now. If you get the SWAM certification from the purchasing division, you can take that certification letter and bid with other entities, and there may be a preference given to you if that other entity reciprocates the state of West Virginia's small women and minority-owned business certification. Now, what other entities am I talking about? If there's another state government that will reciprocate West Virginia SWAM certification status, they may give you a bidding preference as if you are an in-state vendor, or something that levels the playing field between you, a West Virginia vendor, and an in-state vendor in that particular state. I would love to hear a success story where a West Virginia vendor got SWAM certified with purchasing, and then that bidding preference enabled them to bring an out-of-state contract home to West Virginia. In addition, there's federal spend preferences when it comes to SWAM certification. If you're bidding on something with a federal agency or applying for a certain amount of funding from the federal government, West Virginia SWAM certification may help you with that. And we've even had a vendor it was an excavation company, and they were bidding on a contract with the local water company here in West Virginia, and they needed to get the West Virginia SWAM certification certificate for a bidding preference related to that. So applying for SWAM certification is free. And even if you don't want to bid on West Virginia projects right now, there are potentially great benefits to you taking this SWAM certification certificate if you get through the application process and using it to bid out of state or with the federal government or other entities. And we're happy to provide whatever documentation we need to you if you are bidding in another state and you want to use West Virginia SWAM certification as something that might be more likely to help you in that process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senior Buyer Crystal Husted, who is going to go into some more detail about specific contract types that the state awards and how that affects how you bid. First, I'm going to check in with our moderator, Teresa.
I'm going to ask you a couple.
Teresa,
try to get through these.
Before I turn it over to Crystal, Teresa's going to have me answer some more questions. So I'll stand by here to see if I can get through these before I turn you over.
What would it mean if there is not a statewide contract listed for my commodity?
That's a very good question. If there's not a statewide contract listed for your commodity, you still have the opportunity to competitively bid your products with an agency. If an agency needs whatever it is you provide and it's not on a statewide, they would just procure that commodity or service under normal purchasing procedures. And something like that would be listed in the purchasing bulletin in the vendor self-service portal, or procured at that agency delegated level.
By creating an account in VSS, are you applying for SWAM certification at the same time? How long does it usually take to get a certification letter?
Okay, that is a very good question as well. So when you create a user ID in the vendor self-service portal, it doesn't start the registration process within the agency, and it does not start the SWAM certification application process. However, you can apply for SWAM certification in the vendor self-service portal if you choose to do so. That is located, let me go back here. I think I might have it on a screenshot. Okay, it is on this screenshot. So right now the commodities tab is highlighted on this right screenshot. But if you want to apply online for West Virginia SWAM certification status, you could click on the business type tab, which is on the far right, and then indicate whether or not you are applying under small business status, women-owned business status, or minority-owned business status, or some combination of the three. There's also a paper application for SWAM certification status that's called the WV1 or WV1A form, which is located on the Purchasing Division's website, wvpurchasing.gov, under forms at the very bottom. So you could apply for SWAM certification status through the portal or through the paper form, but it's not automatic when you create your login for vendor self-service. It has a SWAM certification application, registration application with any agency. All that has to be done separate from just making that user ID. But the Purchasing Division's registration and SWAM application are the only ones that can be done through the portal. But it's either or. We'll process your application the same whether we receive it electronically or on paper. As far as the timeline for how long it takes, we should be able to get to your SWAM application in less than a week, whether we receive it on paper or electronically. And then as soon as your SWAM application is approved, unless it's not approved, that letter is going to be put into the mail same business day. So that'll just depend on how long it takes that letter to get from Charleston to your location. So
That's it. Thank you.
all right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senior Buyer Crystal Husted.
Good morning, everyone. Mark actually went over in great detail about how to find solicitations in the vendor self-service portal and WV Oasis. I'm going to first start off talking about what types of solicitations that are advertised in vendor self-service. The most commonly advertised is the request for quotation, or we call it an RFQ. And there are actually two different types of RFQs that you will see in vendor self-service. There's CRFQ and an ARFQ. An ARFQ, that is a solicitation that is being advertised by state agencies. So Mark went into detail about the spending thresholds. So if you see a solicitation that starts with ARFQ, you can assume that that solicitation is going to be below $50,000. You'll want to make sure that you review the solicitation documents to see how to respond to an ARFQ. You can do it through, you may do it through vendor self-service electronically, but you want to make sure that you review the documents on how to submit a solicitation response to a state agency, to an ARFQ. If you see that a solicitation begins with CRFQ, you'll know that that is going to more than likely be an award that's going to be over the $50,000 threshold, and those are advertised by the West Virginia Purchasing Division. So it's a central request for quotation. You want to make sure that you read through the instructions to bidders that are contained in the solicitation documents, because that's going to tell you information about how to submit your bid. We here at the Purchasing Division accept bids electronically through vendor self-service. You can also fax your bid into the Purchasing Division. You can mail it. You could also drop it off in person for between the hours of 8:15 to 4:30. Now, the Purchasing Division, if it is a CRFQ, we do not accept emailed responses. I've actually had vendors that try to submit their bids electronic or to me by email. We do not, if it is a CRFQ, we do not accept them by email. Now, if you are, Mark actually talked about how to find the solicitations. When you go into WV Oasis, you want to make sure that you download all of the attachments. So that's where you're going to find your complete solicitation documents. and you want to make sure that you download each one. Now those documents are going to, like I spoke earlier about the instructions to vendors, you're also going to see the terms and conditions that are for that solicitation, specifications, pricing pages. If it's a construction project, you might also find construction documents, drawings, or maps. You want to make sure that you read the instructions to vendors submitting bids, because that's going to tell you information such as if there's going to be a mandatory pre-bid meeting. It's also going to give you the technical question deadline. Each solicitation that we advertise gives a window for vendors to submit questions regarding the solicitation. So you want to make sure that you are aware of when the technical question deadline is. We're also going to give you information on how to respond to a bid with the West Virginia Purchasing Division and the bid opening date and time. Now, if you have technical questions on a solicitation, and I'm going to speak especially to a CRFQ or any solicitations advertised by the Purchasing Division, which I said earlier would be, it would begin with a C. You want to make sure that if you have questions regarding a solicitation, that those must be submitted in writing to the vendor or to the bid. I can't even talk now. To the buyer, listed in the instructions to vendors. We don't accept questions regarding the actual specifications or terms and conditions or anything like that by phone. You have to submit those in writing. Now, during the solicitation process, we do have the blackout period, which means you cannot have direct contact with the agency. So if you have questions regarding the solicitations, you must contact the buyer listed, and that must be in writing. We also have what's called best value solicitations. And the first one that we'll discuss is a request for proposal. No, those are solicited by the Purchasing Division. Those are awarded to the highest scoring vendor. Now, with a CR or a request for proposal, we do not accept responses by through vendor self-service. So those actually have to be submitted hard copy. And there's two different sections to an RFP. We have the technical portion and the cost, and those need to be in separate envelopes. We also have the expression of interest. Expression of interest. Those are for architectural and engineering services, and those are actually evaluated by, it's based on qualifications and experience, and it is actually ranked by the Best Value Committee. Usually those will have an interview, and that the agency will score on the interview process as well. And the award actually goes to the highest ranked vendor. And then that's when you'll enter negotiations with the agency to determine the price. Now, during the process, you cannot have contact with the agency or the architectural engineering firm. So any questions would need to be submitted to the agency, or submitted to the Purchasing Division buyer. Now, there is two different types of expression of interest. If it has an AEOI, that is going to be advertised by the state agency. And then we have the CEOI, which is advertised by the West Virginia Purchasing Division. We also have a request for information, which will be a CRFI. And this is used for market research purposes only. There's no award from a CRFI. And you'll have to submit your responses to the Purchasing Division, and we don't accept those electronically through vendor self-service. So those would actually have to be mailed, dropped off in person, or faxed. Now, when you're submitting your bid, you want to make sure that if you're responding to a solicitation, you want to make sure that you can meet all the requirements that are listed in the documents. So you want to make sure that you read the specifications carefully. If it has words such as will, shall, must, you want to make sure that you can meet all of those mandatory requirements before submitting your bid. You also want to make sure that anything that requires a notary seal, that's been completed. We also, on every contract that the state awards, we require commercial general liability insurance. And you can see those requirements, any insurance requirements in Section 8 of the general terms and conditions of the solicitation. The state must be listed as an additional insured and a certificate holder on that certificate of insurance. If the solicitation requires a bid bond, and that's generally required on any type of construction contracts, you want to make sure that your bid bond is completed correctly and that it is submitted with your bid. We can't obtain a bid bond after the bid opening, so it must be submitted with your bid. We also have vendor preference forms, and those must be submitted with the bid. And if you look in our terms and conditions, section 15, and the instructions to vendors, read sections 15 through 16, and that will give you information on what types of commodities or service that vendor preference forms would be applicable. Other documents that will be, you're not required to submit it with your bid, but it would be required prior to the award of a contract. If there were any addendums that were issued during the solicitation process, you're going to be required to submit an addendum acknowledgement form. If there was any type of licensing or certifications that were required in the solicitation, you're going to have to provide those prior to award, such as, if you have a nursing license or a contractor's license and it was required in the solicitation, you'll have to provide those prior to award. And you will see those in section 7 of the actual general terms and conditions of the solicitation. If it's a construction contract, you'll also be required to provide the drug-free workplace affidavit and a subcontractors list. And all of these would be required. They're not required to be submitted with your bid, but they would be required prior to award. If you're submitting your response in WV Oasis, you could either do it all as one attachment, or you could attach if you're attaching your terms and conditions, your pricing page, you could do those all separate, or you could upload it all into as one document attachment. Bids must be received by the date and time that's listed on the instructions to vendors. The state bylaw cannot accept any bids that are received late. So here at the purchasing division, our bid closing is always 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you arrive in our front office at 1:31, we will not be able to accept your bid. It would be considered late. So you always want to make sure that you review in the instructions to vendors what time that particular solicitation closes, because like I said, by law, we cannot accept late bids. Now, if you're responding to any solicitation that begins with an A, you want to make sure that you read the instructions to vendors or the solicitation documents carefully to make sure that you are aware of how to submit your bid, because we at the central purchasing division may have a different procedure than what the agency that you're responding to has. So they may, you may be able to submit your bid by email to the agency, but here at the purchasing division, we don't accept email bids. So you always want to make sure that if you're responding to an agency delegated purchase, that you review the instructions on how to submit a bid to that particular agency. So Central purchasing solicitations, that's the purchasing division. You can submit your bid, like I said, through vendor self-service. You can fax it. We do accept paper bids by mail or dropped off in person. Now, if you are faxing your bid, and like I said, our bids close at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, you want to make sure that you start faxing your bid early in the day, because around 12 o'clock, people start faxing their bids in, and it can get the fax machine can get bogged down. So you want to make sure that you start faxing your bid earlier in the morning, because all pages have to be received. Your last page of your bid has to be received by 1:30 p.m. If it is like I said, if it's 1:31 and we haven't received the last page, it will be considered late and disqualified. Following the bid opening, all bids received are posted on the West Virginia Purchasing Division's website. So that's how you can see, every bid that we receive for a solicitation, all solicitations that open that day are posted on our website. Now, once the bids have opened and are posted on our website, the agency will begin to do the evaluation. If it's advertised by the purchasing division, the state agency will then complete their evaluation, and they'll submit their recommendation to award to their purchasing division buyer. Now, I'll use myself as an example. So once an agency has submitted their recommendation to award to me, that's when I'll begin my review, and I'll make sure that the vendor that they have recommended to award to meets all the mandatory requirements listed in the solicitation. Once I've completed my evaluation and I agree with their recommendation, that's when I'll begin the award process. Mandatory requirements prior to award is regarding registration. You must be registered with the West Virginia Secretary of State's office, the West Virginia Tax Department, Insurance Commission, and you also must be complete your registration in WV Oasis. For solicitations that have been advertised by the purchasing division, once we've awarded a contract, each vendor that submitted a response to that solicitation will be notified by an emailed letter that the contract has been awarded, and that letter will state who it has been awarded to. No work can be done until, if you are the lowest bidder and you're being awarded the contract, you cannot begin work until you receive that notification that you've been awarded and the contract has been encumbered. So once you receive that encumbered contract, the blackout period is no longer in effect, and you can actually reach out to the agency contact person, and the agency contact person will be listed on the face of the contract. So you know exactly who to reach out to once you receive your award. Now, we do have two types of protest procedures. We have the protest to specifications. So if you're reading the specifications and that, you believe that it is geared towards one brand name or one type of product, you have the ability to actually protest the specifications. That protest must be submitted in writing 5 days prior to the bid opening. We also have the protest of award. So I talked about, once a contract is awarded through the purchasing division, you'll receive an email letter that states that the contract has been awarded and who it has been awarded to. So that begins the protest period. You have 5 days after the award of the contract. So when you receive that letter, that's when your 5 days begin. And you have to submit your protest in writing to the purchasing division buyer. Now, after a contract is awarded, there might be instances where we'll have to do a change to the contract, and those are called change orders. Some of those modifications might be renewals. We might need to extend a contract. If it's a construction contract and there's been an issue or something arises that was going to take longer than expected, then we might issue a change order for that. Now, no work can be performed until you receive that encumbered change order. Now, a change order for an agency level contract, the agency, that particular state agency is going to process that change order. If it is a contract that begins with a CMA or a CPO, that is going to be processed by the purchasing division. It's prepared by the agency, and then it's submitted to the purchasing division buyer. They're going to review it, and then it goes through our approval process. And then it goes to the AG's office. It's encumbered, and then that's when the renewal will begin, or the additional work might begin. Now, things to remember, I talked about earlier, we cannot accept late bids at the purchasing division. We also have the blackout period, which is when a solicitation is out to bid. You cannot have any type of communication with the state agency. All communication must be routed through the purchasing division buyer. Once that contract has been awarded and encumbered, then the blackout period is no longer in effect, and you can actually have contact with the state agency. We do, when you're submitting your bid, we encourage you to submit all the documents prior to the award or with your bid. That way we can speed up the award process. Oftentimes we have to reach out to vendors to request anything in the bid package that requires signature. We'll have to contact vendors for them to sign certain documents or to provide the insurance certificate. So if you could get all of those documents within your bid response, that helps speed up the award process. And then we actually have each solicitation will have either an agency master terms and conditions or the general terms and conditions. If it's a solicitation that's being advertised by a state agency, that would be the agency terms and conditions. If it is a one that's being advertised by the purchasing division, then it would be the purchasing division's general terms and conditions. And we have the link to those on this PowerPoint. Now, after a contract has been awarded, if there's any issues that may arise, if you are going to be late delivering something, or if you can't provide the product that you bid on in the amount of time that the agency required, you want to make sure that you communicate with the agency contact. Now, the agency will document any type of communication that they've had with you. If multiple attempts to resolve the issue have failed, the agency will then contact the purchasing division to step in and try to resolve any issues. And then we have the references page here, and this will give you links to different sections of our website. And now I am actually going to turn it back over to Mark Totten to finish this webinar.
Thank you so much, Crystal, and everybody. This will be brief. I won't beleaguer any points for you all, so you all don't have to listen to me again for very long. I just want to bring everything home here and sort of sum up the 3 strategies that I really recommend you identify and find which strategy fits your business model the best. First of all, read the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin in the VSS portal as regularly as possible. There's ways that we didn't really have time to get into about how you could potentially get automatic alerts, but I encourage you the most to beef up your commodity code listing so agency procurement officers can search and find you for a particular thing. You may not compete for everything that you see that you can provide, but you're not going to have the freedom to make the choice of, do I want to take the time to bid on this or not, if you're not aware of what we're trying to buy. Second of all, market yourself directly to a handful or more of relevant agencies that you think might need your products and services, especially if you think your average transaction is going to be in that under $50,000 world. And then the third, if you think that you can provide one of the most common commodities to all of the states, look at our statewide contract page for opportunities, see when those contracts are going to expire, and then make a timeline plan on and do some homework on how you might compete in the most informed way possible the next time we have one of these commonly procured commodities out for bid. You know, knowing what the state needs is really the biggest piece of this puzzle. And there's tools at your disposal, the purchasing bulletin, the VSS portal, those commodity code listings, introducing yourself to the procurement officers that might be most relevant to what it is you can sell to the state. And there is a tremendous amount of information on our website under the Vendor Resource Center, vendor registration page, and the transparency section of wvpurchasing.gov. And then, of course, you know, consider the timeline under which you want to keep your vendor registration with the purchasing division updated, and consider that SWAM certification application. All of our contact information is here, both for Crystal and myself, as well as for Angelina Villanueva, who is our vendor registration coordinator. We can all provide information to you about anything covered today, any of the specific processes like registration, or how email alerts might work, or finding commodity codes that might be relevant to you. We are happy to be at your disposal. We want to connect you with the right information. So this conversation can continue after this webinar is over with. And we want you to competitively bid on anything that you can provide to the state. So please, we appreciate any time that the vendors take to research solicitations that are out there. I do everything I can, and I know Crystal is the same way. Any vendor who wants to know more about the procurement process with the state, will go out of our way to connect you with information that helps you make those preparations if you want to compete in the public process. So I want to thank everybody who put up with me this morning, and all of you that tuned in and absorbed this information. And we know we're throwing a lot at you in a short amount of time, but hopefully this introduction took down some walls of intimidation and gave you some ideas about how you might be able to compete and win a state contract. So I'm very grateful for your time, and we hope that we can communicate with you further. We have a few minutes for questions, and to moderate that, I'm going to turn that over to Teresa, and both Crystal Husted and myself are at your disposal for anything else you want to know more about.
We'll see. We got a couple minutes. I don't know if we can get through all of them. A reminder that we will follow up with you following this webinar if we don't address your question that you typed in. Here's a quick one. Is the $50,000 per requirement or fiscal year?
The $50,000 threshold is going to be for a particular transaction. So if an agency needs a vehicle of some type, or just whatever widget, if it is expected to exceed 50,000, then it's going to be bid under Central Purchasing Authority. Is there anything, Crystal, that you want to add to that?
It would be, the $50,000 would be per transaction, per purchase.
Sure. Okay, per transaction.
The last few slides may have addressed this question. We have a process you need, but you don't know about it. What do we do?
Can you repeat that question, Teresa?
From what I understand, this particular business or service has something that they believe the state needs, but we don't know about it. The state doesn't know about it. How do they let the state know?
Oh, okay. If you have something that you think would benefit an agency, then by all means contact the procurement officer for the agency that would need that. The list of the procurement officer listing on our website under the Vendor Resource Center has over 100 agencies listed. Hopefully you're able to identify which agency would have the need for your product or service to enhance its mission. So by all means, let that procurement officer know that you're out there and that you have that particular commodity and you're on standby to provide it.
I do want to add some additional information. I have vendors contact me trying to market themselves here at the purchasing division. We actually purchase on behalf of state agencies. So we actually don't have any decision making in the purchasing process as far as what they're going to purchase. So you want to make sure that if you're marketing yourself, that you're marketing yourself to the procurement officers listed in the link that Mark provided. So I mean, if you contact a central purchasing buyer, we're just going to refer you to the procurement officer listing, because like I said, we only purchase on behalf of, we don't make the purchasing decisions as far as what an agency needs.
Right. You don't have to convince us. You save your time and convince the agencies.
All righty. I want to thank Mark and Crystal for this great, valuable information for our vendors. And again, let you know that we've taken note of the questions you have submitted. And I also want to remind you, you'll get a survey from us this afternoon. We really appreciate your feedback and hope you'll participate in that. Thanks for hanging in there with us and have a great day.